Hi and welcome to the new sound design tool Transformer from Digital Brain Instruments. Transformer is a kind of vocoder morphing tool where you can morph one sound into another or modulate a mix of several carrier sounds with different modulators. Transformer is a standalone application, but you can connect it to any compatible host via Rewire. We'll have a closer look at this later. First, we have a look at how to configure a transformer. In the top right corner, you find the settings. Here you can adjust your audio driver, your input device and output device, set the sampling rate and buffer size, and assign inputs and outputs. Next step is the MIDI setup. You can open this window with the M key. Here you can configure any MIDI keyboard or controller to take control over several parameters of Transformer. It's highly recommended to use a MIDI controller when working with Transformer. First, click on Scan and select your MIDI device. By pressing the boxes in front of the parameters, you can MIDI learn your controller to that specific parameter. Now, I easily can control the faders of the mixer and some more parameters with my MIDI controller. On the left side of Transformer, you find the modulator section, the mixer, and on the right side, you find the carrier section. And this small section down here is an advanced crossfader, but more about that later. So, let's have a look at the carrier section first. Here you can mix your carrier signal with sounds in up to 4 sample decks. Additionally, you can mix VST instruments to your carrier in the Instruments tab. Here you can load up to 2 VST instruments simultaneously. To load a VST instrument, just click on Browse and point to your VST plugins folder. By clicking on the name of the loaded plugin, you can open its user interface. To trigger or play the VST instruments, you have 2 options. First is Auto Key. Here you can set a MIDI note, which is then triggered simultaneously with all the sample decks as soon as you hit play. The other option is to directly play the notes you want with your MIDI keyboard. Of course, you could also send MIDI from a host through a virtual MIDI driver or Rewire. And don't forget to activate the instrument slots. To remove an instrument, just press the little X on the right side. To save or load an instrument preset, just press the buttons S for save and L for load. Let's have a closer look at the sample players in the carrier section. Transformer comes already loaded with many ready-to-use sounds, brought to you by Mechanical Wave Sound Effects. Of course, you can also load your own sounds by clicking on File and selecting the sound you want. Another option to load a sound to a sample deck is to directly drag and drop it from the Finder. To listen to the sound loaded to a sample deck, just press and hold Preview. You can also listen to all sounds loaded to all sample decks at once by pressing on All. You can also select a whole folder for a sample deck. There's still just one sound loaded per deck, but this way you can easily browse through all sounds in one folder. By clicking on the small arrow on the right, you can easily see and select all the sounds in the folder. If you don't want to playback the whole loaded sound, you can click and drag in the waveform to draw a selection. By clicking on the small N in the upper right corner, you can normalize the loaded sound. You can zoom in and out by holding down the Command key and click and drag up and down. You can adjust the start and end of your selection with the mouse by holding down the Shift key. Start and end of your selection can also be adjusted simultaneously by holding down the Control key and dragging up and down with the mouse, while dragging left or right moves the selection in this direction. Additionally, you can edit your sound by adjusting the playback speed, the pitch, and the delay. so you can delay the start of each sample deck to each other. In the upper right corner, you also find a panorama fader and the envelope. The waveform in the envelope window always shows exactly the selection in the sample player. With the T button on the right side, you can make the envelope window stay on top. All 4 sample players are identical. Next is the spectral crossover filter. Here you can select the frequency range which should be processed. With the inner and outer button, you can choose if the frequencies inside the selection or the frequencies outside the selection should be processed. By switching from out to in, the discarded frequency range is also sent to the stereo output, but without being processed. This way you can add another layer to your sound. To further sculpt your carrier layers, you have the possibility to load up to 2 VST effect plugins to each of the sample players. Just click on Browse, point to your VST plugins folder, and select the plugin you want. And don't forget to turn the effect slots on. Next is the XY pad. Here you can mix the outputs of the 4 sample players before the convolution process. Next to the XY pad, you find the input-depending mixer. Here you can set a threshold to gate the outputs of each sample player. On the bottom we have a crossfader section. Here you can blend between wet and dry and 2 different processing modes. First, there's a wet-dry mixer, where you can adjust if you want to listen to the dry or the processed signal. With the buttons below, you can choose if you want to crossfade between the wet-dry signal of the A processing or the B processing, or a mix of both. The A processing is the standard processing, where the modulator affects the carrier signal. In the B processing mode, this is vice versa, so the carrier signal affects the modulator signal. You can blend between or mix these 2 modes with the crossfader on the right side. The large crossfader on the bottom is a mix of the other 2 crossfaders. So here you can blend from A processing dry over A processing wet, then blending from processing mode A to processing mode B, and further from processing mode B wet to processing B dry. And all this in one go. The last section on the right side is the master section. Here you find a 5-band parametric equalizer, a global pitch for the stereo output, a global LFO which affects the volume, and a phaser. And finally, there are 4 slots to load VST effect plugins. So you can bring in a summing limiter or whatever you need to finalize your sound. Let's check out the mixer section. In the mixer you have 7 faders. The first fader is for the modulator signal. If you want to listen to the dry modulator signal, just press the pre button and press play. Next are the 5 faders for the carrier layer outputs. And finally, the master fader to adjust the volume of transformer stereo output. Let's have a closer look at the input section now, the modulator section. There are 4 kinds of inputs that can be used as a modulator. The first option is audio, which is a sample player similar to the carrier sample players, but without the delay option. Let's have a listen to it. I select the sample from the drop-down menu and I only want to modulate the first sample player of the carriers. I draw a selection on both the modulator and the carrier and select loop. Now I play around with the playback speed and pitch parameters. To reset a parameter, just click on the field and press backspace. Now let's adjust the volume envelope. The envelope always perfectly matches the selection. The next option for the modulator input is to use a connected microphone. This lets you work and play with Transformer in the most intuitive way. Let's give this a try by using a VST instrument for the carrier. So I load an instrument to the first slot in the carrier section and turn it on. And as you can see, my voice is already coming here into the input of Transformer. And I now play the instrument with the MIDI keyboard.
And while I talk, you hear we have a classic vocoder effect. And I can manipulate this sound with the synthesizer easily by adjusting the pitch or adjusting any other parameter on the fly. This gives quite interesting results, as you can hear.
The third input for the modulator can also be an instrument. So the carrier signal can be modulated by the output of this synthesizer and by playing it with a MIDI keyboard or from any other MIDI input. And option number 4 for the modulator input is a procedural sound generator. So if you don't have any audio file or no connected microphone or no VST instrument, you can instantly generate a sound with this procedural generator. Here you also find the T button as in the envelopes window to keep this window on top. The procedural sound starts playing as soon as you move the fader. If you stop moving the fader, the sound stops as well. If you want the sound to keep playing, just press hold. I first apply to carrier 1 and then to carrier number 3. If you want to record your performance, just open the recording tab, select the bit depth and file format and channel count, and choose a destination to save your sound. As soon as you hit the rec button, the stereo output of Transformer is recorded. And here is the finished recording. Now we have a look at how to set up as a rewire client. First, go to Settings and select AD Rewire as a driver. Then quit Transformer and start the rewire host. I use Studio 1.4 for that. In the host, set up the rewire connection and restart Transformer. There are two rewire modes in Transformer. Rewire mode A just sends the stereo output from Transformer to the rewire host, and in rewire mode B, the outputs of the different modules are split and spread over the rewire channels. So you get a stereo main out, stereo outputs of all the carriers, stereo output of the instrument, and a stereo output of the dry signal. Heads up, in rewire mode the microphone input is disabled. As you can see, as soon as I press play, the stereo output from Transformer is directly sent to the rewire host. To record this directly in Studio One, I just create a new stereo audio track, name it, and assign the appropriate input. Turn the track to record enable, press record, and press play on Transformer. And so now, Transformer plays directly into Studio One. Through Rewire, you can also send MIDI information directly from your Rewire host to Transformer. Just select the appropriate MIDI port and create some MIDI notes. Now I select an instrument in Transformer, and as soon as I hit play, the MIDI goes from Studio One to Transformer and the stereo output from Transformer goes back to Studio One. This can now either be recorded or bounced, even offline, in Studio One. I hope you liked the walkthrough and have a lot of fun with Transformer by Digital Brain Instruments.